Hello, this is Raymond Posch with another episode of New Ways of Being. And today I'm going to continue the trend with reading some articles by Craig Hamilton. He's one of the leading teachers about evolution of consciousness. He teaches that in a couple of different courses, I believe. And I attended those courses a number of years ago. But he has some very good articles, either in his blog or in this case, I'm going to read from a transcript of a audio recording that he did. It was probably on his podcast, but I'm not positive. But this is called "If You're Awake, You're Responsible: The Evolutionary Leadership Challenge." So I'm wanting to continue to uh, get followers of the podcast here to think about evolution of consciousness and awakening and what those mean specifically to you, and what they mean to the world at large as well. So let me read this, and I'll probably add a few comments before I close. Okay, so this is what he said. When we devote ourselves to a path of spiritual transformation, it's natural that most of us focus on the experiences and states of consciousness that we hope awakening will catalyze. Feelings of expansiveness, joy, balance, peace, love, and inspiration. Those are all feelings or experiences that people want to get out of their awakening process or their spiritual growth. So let me go on. But as we talk, oh, excuse me, I goofed that up. But as we walk the spiritual path, we often don't consider what we might call the implications of awakening. These are the less anticipated consequences of being a more awakened person. One of the most powerful implications of awakening is that as you begin to wake up, you find that you have more clarity, more perspective, better judgment, and a deeper care for making things better. You begin to care more deeply about others and what happens in the world. In this process, something interesting begins to happen. You start to find that in many situations, you have more clarity and insight than others around you. This is something you notice yourself, and also something that others begin to reflect back to you. Oftentimes, you find that you're the person in the room with the most wisdom. This is partly because awakening opens us to a deeper intuitive sense of what needs to happen in any situation. But it's also because we're becoming sensitive to the movements of ego in others and in ourselves, and want to do what we can to steer around these obstacles to reach higher, more positive outcomes. I'm not saying this to make any of us feel proud. If you're the most enlightened person in the room, it doesn't really mean anything about you. It doesn't mean you're special. It means you're lucky. You're fortunate that you've had the eyes to see and the ears to hear and the higher potential to awaken. What's awakening in you is something that's a universal potential for all of us. So it's not about going around thinking you're the most awakened person. But nonetheless, you'll often find that you have access to a clarity and wisdom that others aren't in touch with. And with this wisdom comes a kind of responsibility. Because you're awake, you're responsible for what you're now awake to. Now, let me interject a comment here. This is mine, not Craig speaking. Um, Awakening, most often, at least in its initial forms, is awakening to greater awareness. And that's very much about what evolution of consciousness is about as well. That's what raising consciousness or raising your frequency. That's what it's about. It's about becoming more aware as a person. And as you become more aware, you tap more and more into universal consciousness. And when you tap into that, you are tapping into the wisdom of universal consciousness. So you do increase your wisdom and your clarity. So I just wanted to point that out. Awakening is sometimes people think it's very mysterious, but it's all about becoming more aware. More aware means that's what you focus on. That's what you put your attention on. Whatever that is, uh, that is becoming more aware. Now, typically, like if we're meditating, for example, we're more aware during that time we're meditating. And when we stop, we're typically less aware. We shift out of the focus and focusing, which is awareness, putting our attention, it's very typical to put attention on our breathing while we're meditating, or we can put our attention on anything else. It could be on a spot on the wall or on a tree or something, on the sky. Okay, let me go on. So he said, and with this wisdom comes a kind of responsibility. Because you're awake, you're responsible for what you're now awake to. This presents us with what I call the evolutionary leadership challenge. As you awaken, you start to find that because you're more clear and aware and passionate about changing things for the better, you're in a natural, pardon me, you're in a natural position of leadership, whether you think of yourself as a leader or not. The more you awaken to a deeper dimension of reality, to deeper parts of yourself, and to higher possibilities for humanity, the more you feel a calling to serve the further evolution of the process, because you're beginning to see how non-separate you are from this bigger process and everything that's part of it. You begin to feel a greater sense of responsibility for all of it. We're awakening to the future that's trying to be born for the human race. And there's an inherent obligation to do whatever we can to bring that potential into the world, to express it, to model it, to demonstrate it, and possibly even to awaken others to it. It's up to us. So, the big evolutionary challenge in all of this is that as you awake to this new potential, you begin to realize that it's me that has to do this. Whether we see ourselves as leaders or not, it's up to us to evolve the world. We can't wait for someone else to do it. If we see things about this world that need to change, they're ours to change. Now, this can be a difficult point for many people to take in because a lot of us feel ambivalent about the idea of leadership. Some of us feel uncomfortable about the idea of holding power. We've seen leadership and power abused, and we don't want to risk falling prey to those temptations ourselves. Others of us just don't want the burden of responsibility that comes with stepping into leadership. After all, if things don't go well, the leader often tends to get the blame. Being a leader means being willing to take the responsibility, to be the one out front with arrows in their back. But from the point of view of this cosmic project of higher evolution, which it is, there's really no one else who's going to do this. If we awaken to ourselves as the evolutionary impulse, we realize that we were the one who created this whole thing in the first place. And it's ours to take care of. It's ours to evolve. There's no one else to point to for that. On one hand, this sense of evolutionary leadership can feel like an obligation. But another way to look at it is that as our heart begins to open to an evolutionary relationship to life, we also awaken a deeper care for the whole. We discover a care for the evolution of the whole event. And in that deeper care, we come to a place where there's nothing that we feel is not, in some way, our responsibility. It is the responsibility of humanity to awaken. And if you happen to be the one who's most awake, you know, in your group or in your area or whatever at this time, then you're the one being called to help make it happen. So that doesn't, what I think I'm repeating here, that this doesn't mean that everything is our fault. It means that if we can do something about it, we're going to because we care that much. We're no longer drawing boundaries around what we're willing to care for and what we're not willing to care for. The whole thing is ours. We love all of it equally, and we will do whatever we can in any situation to help it move forward and realize its potential. The end of victim consciousness. If you make this shift in perspective, you'll start to notice that it changes the game. It changes the way you're relating to your day-to-day life. Situations that used to just seem ordinary or run-of-the-mill are now opportunities to practice stepping up. In a sense, every relationship, every social context we're in presents an opportunity to show up differently and forge something new. As you start to become more proactive in this way, you'll also find that you stop taking a victimized stance in relationship to dysfunction around you. A common response to situations that irritate us is to feel victimized by them. We tend to feel like a victim and we blame others for the things that aren't working. But what if, instead of allowing any room for victimization, you assumed the position that you're the only one who can transform these frustrating situations? This speaks to the heart of the evolutionary leadership challenge. It's recognizing that if you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear what's wrong, it means that it's yours to change. It's yours to do because you can see it. Other people might not be aware of it. They might not see what you see. This doesn't mean that it's only your job to do, but it's about letting go of any notion that somehow somebody else is the one who's supposed to fix it or evolve it. It's allowing the burden of the evolution of the whole world to fall on your own or our own shoulders. For instance, let's say you work in an organization that has terrible environmental habits. All kinds of recyclables are getting thrown away, and the windows are regularly left open with the heat or air conditioning left on. Or let's say you work in an organization that has an unhealthy organizational culture in which the leadership is out of touch with what's happening within the company. And there are all kinds of unhealthy dynamics. I know from my own experience in the corporate world, that is very common. What if, instead of just feeling frustrated about this situation, you saw it as an evolutionary leadership challenge? What if you took responsibility for being the one to change it? Now, you might think that you don't have any power to change these situations, and if you raise your voice, you would just get fired. And that might be true in some cases, so it might not always be worth the risk. But very often we have a lot more power and potential to change things than we initially sense or admit. Putting evolutionary leadership into practice. I want to leave you with a simple exercise for putting this challenge into practice. Take a moment and think about a context in your life where you're frustrated with what's happening. It could be in the political sphere. For instance, many of us right now are feeling incredibly frustrated with how our governmental leaders are responding to the pandemic. And by the way, this dates back to July of 2020. So that's what's being referred to. Um, so that's my place here. Okay. You might be frustrated with how government leaders were responding to the pandemic back then in 2020. Or it might be in an organization you're a part of. It could be in your community or in your family. Think of a situation or context where you're frustrated with what's happening and with the lack of good leadership. Boy, we sure have that in the United States right now at a governmental level. So think about something you're frustrated with. Write it down and include what's frustrating about it. Now think about how you could respond differently from the perspective that it's all up to you. Take it on as your evolutionary leadership challenge and see what role you might be able to play in moving this particular situation forward. Think about what steps you might take to evolve the situation if it was yours to do. So think about something maybe in where you work, something in your company or your workplace, something that you might, um, if you accept the evolutionary leadership challenge, that you might take responsibility for to help find a solution. You don't have to say this, like if you were speaking to your boss, you don't have to say, well, you see this and it's all wrong. And you might say instead, well, I have some ideas where uh, maybe we need a new approach that might be a little different. It might be more effective. It might be some ideas that your boss or somebody else's boss hadn't thought of before, or might not even realize that it's a problem to the degree that it is. That happens in a lot of businesses, so or a lot of organizations. So think about what steps you could take to evolve the situation if it was yours to do. Then commit to experimenting with this new perspective by putting it into action and observe what happens. I and At the time he recorded this, he, uh, he was saying he'd love to hear the results of your experiment, and I'd love to hear the results of your experiment. You know, as an alternative, I always put in my podcast notes, the podcast description. I always put my email address in there, and if you feel so inclined, send me an email. If you experiment with this and want to share your results, send me an email. I'd love to hear what your experience was. So that's the end of that particular article, or he might have recorded it, but it became an article when it was transcribed. So I want to come back to the point that evolution, I have really moved more and more into a position that I can observe and really see that evolution of consciousness is increasingly happening in the world. You might not see it. You sure won't hear it in the news. It's not something anybody would talk about in the news, but it is happening in the world. And it shows up in what a lot of different people and organizations are doing, that as they've become more awake and more aware and more and more tuned in to the call to evolution that is happening. I've heard people share their stories with me where I've seen what they've done in an organization of some type. One organization that comes to mind is Humanity's Team. It's a huge organization that has been around, I know, more than 10 years. I think it might be 20 years if I'm remembering right. And they are, their objective is to help people become more aware, more conscious, to live more consciously. And also, as a part of that, to understand and see, as you become more aware, you tap into that universal consciousness and you will realize that it is all part of one oneness, one wholeness. And we are being called to recognize that and to participate in that wholeness. When we see the wholeness, the fact that every person in the world, even if they don't know it and they don't act like it, is a part of the oneness. And different ones of us are awakening, sooner than others, and we can become aware of it. And we can begin to see that evolution is happening and it is calling, basically, the universe is calling human beings to start participating, to hear the call, to start participating more actively in this call to evolve personally and to help humanity evolve as a whole. So that's why I've been reading these wonderful articles from Craig Hamilton and sharing some of my own thoughts at other times. And I hope this is resonating with you. it does have an effect of resonance. It resonates. It messages that all human beings, for example, might are intended to hear, like this one, resonates if they give it a chance. And as we move more and more into awareness of what is happening and to alignment with evolution of the universe, evolution of consciousness, we begin to shift into coherence with that universal evolution. It is very powerful. Let me tell you, it is awe-inspiring. You will, as you awaken more and more to it, become more aware of it, you will feel more and more inspired. You will feel more and more wanting to make a difference in the world. As you do, you will feel more and more joy in the fact that you are awake and you are participating. And it grows with time. So take it to heart. Listen to this again if you feel motivated to do that. If you heard something that you want to go back to, go back and listen to the episode again. And thank you for listening. And please have a great day and a great life.